Hello and welcome to the December 2022 monthly webinar. My name is Michael Kramer and I am presenting to you today on behalf of Perry Johnson Laboratory Accreditation, where I am the Calibration and Inspection Program Manager, and I am coming to you live from my home in rainy Central Virginia today. As always, this webinar is being recorded. You can go back and re-listen to this, or perhaps go back and listen to some past webinars. Just follow the webinar tab at the PJLA website. You can also extract the slides if you would like to utilize them in your organization. By all means, feel free. Currently, hopefully everybody can hear me. I cannot hear you. You are muted. However, there is a question tab there. So as you can see, today we're presenting on section 6.2 of 17025, 2017, which is a section on requirements for personnel. Please keep the questions in regards to today's topic. Feel free to type into the question tab there, and at the conclusion of the presentation, I can go back and review them and give you feedback and answer them to the best of my ability. Again, hey, welcome everybody for joining us on this end of the year webinar. This is 12 of 12. Done a webinar every month this year. Appreciate y'all joining us. So again, we're looking at personnel. So is your laboratory personnel qualified to perform the testing or calibration activities under your scope of accreditation? Now, hopefully the answer to that question is yes. And looking at the requirements in 17025, however, one of the main ingredients in this determination is providing evidence of competency, which may include things such as training records, along with other qualifications, records such as educational and perhaps past experience. So with that being said, we're going to dissect this section clause by clause. Is this enough evidence here to meet the requirements of the section 6.2 in 17025? Well, we'll take a look, and like I said, we'll go through the section clause by clause, give you some feedback here. So right off the bat, that's clause number 621. And I highlighted a couple items here, and we'll just read the clause straight out. All personnel of the laboratory, either internal or external, that could influence the laboratory activities, shall act impartially, be competent, and work in accordance with the laboratory management system. First thing there is all personnel that could influence. So, of course, the first thing that would come to mind would be the the personnel that are performing the test or calibration under your scope. By all means, this section would include those folks. However, when it says all personnel that could influence, it that would expand beyond those folks that are providing the nuts and bolts of providing your customer with their calibration or testing results. All personnel would also include such activities as an internal auditor. They would fall under the realm. Standard is less repetitious. So an example I'd like to state, those folks that were accredited to the prior 2005 standard used to state that the internal auditor shall be trained. Still says that, it, however, is captured now under personnel, all personnel, and the requirements for train, it would fall into the realm of being impartial and being competent. And we'll talk about how that can be projected or used as authorize someone to do your internal audit. And of course, you have to determine they were competent. Folks that perhaps work on your machine providing maintenance, purchasing, particularly those individuals that are directly involved with those critical purchases that will directly impact your testing or calibration, perhaps calibration providers or reference materials or equipment, those individuals that have to be knowledgeable in regards to the needs and the inputs that would go into providing those reliable testing and calibration results. And contract personnel, if you folks, anybody out there, contract individuals, they would fall into the realm. So it's all laboratory personnel. They could influence the laboratory activities. And we have shall act impartially and competent. Look at those two terms here. Impartiality, so when it specifies that definition right out of 17025, is the presence of objectivity. Impartiality, of course, it comes up in section 6.2, but comes up in various parts, other parts of the standard. One here, right off the bat under 414, first time risk comes up. You can see the requirement there. So something that states it should be looked at on an ongoing basis. Competent. So definition of competent could be stating having suitable or sufficient skills, knowledge, experience, etc. for some purpose. So again, we see it captured here under personnel, but the term comes up in a couple other places throughout the standard. Under methods, for example, under this clause here, when method development is required, there shall be planned activity and shall be assigned to competent personnel equipped with adequate resources. Clause 622, the laboratory shall document the competence requirements for each function influencing the laboratory, the results of the laboratory activities, which will include things such as educational qualifications, training, technical knowledge, skills, and experience. So a document, has to be specified somewhere within the quality management system. There's many ways you have a lot of flexibility there, and there's many ways an organization can document competencies of personnel. I would say as an assessor, and it used to be a requirement in the old 2005 standard that you shall have job descriptions. See that brought forth, and that can definitely still be used as a vehicle for documenting competence requirements for each function within the laboratory, which could influence laboratory results. However, there's again flexibility here. So 9 times out of 10, I would say I see it still captured in job descriptions. However, it can also be documented in other formats, such as perhaps a job posting template. This has to be documented somewhere. So influence the results, laboratory personnel. These would include such things as, like I said, not just the folks that are performing the test or calibration, but perhaps review of contracts, anyone going out performing sampling or analyzing method performance, perhaps uncertainty, those folks that may be involved with developing your uncertainty budgets or performing uncertainty calculations. We mentioned purchasing there, but also receiving, bringing in artifacts for test or receiving samples, assuring that it's suitable for testing or calibration under the scope and everything is clearly defined. Reporting the results, and we'll look at that a little bit further, but you can see the clause under 7821, that person should be competent, and that person under 7821 would be specified. That's reporting the results will be specified on the report as well. Management or supervision, and again, as we mentioned before, auditing. 623, the laboratory shall ensure that the personnel have the competence to perform laboratory activities for which they are responsible and to evaluate the significance of any deviations. So again, there's a shall there, which is a requirement. So must evaluate to ensure that the individual is competent to perform their assigned laboratory function. This can be done, for example, by checking the appropriateness of things such as educational, training experience, and or demonstrated skills. Once that is done, it's been evaluated, questions should be asked, is evidence available to demonstrate that a person meets all the criteria and supports that he or she can be qualified to perform set laboratory activity? If the answer to that is no, then perhaps training actions has to be undertaken, and the training program has to include the evaluation of the new competence and the evidence that the evaluation will need to be recorded. Those evidence can consist of, where applicable, such things as educational paths, such as perhaps a technical degree, depending on what the competency requirements are that you're determined, any special certificate or diploma, perhaps some involvement in publications, records of involvement in calibration or testing operations, and assessment of the participation, record of involvement in internal and external comparison, i.e. perhaps successful proficiency testing results, record of involvement in research networks, perhaps you're involved in method development in your testing organization, or involved in standardizations, records of evaluation of uncertainty, perhaps a training record there in that specific area. If a individual is going to be tasked with perhaps calculating uncertainties and establishing and maintaining uncertainty budgets. And last but not least, past employment experiences. So the better the competence specifications are defined, the easier it will be to demonstrate the fulfillment of the competence requirements. Moving on to clause 624, the management of the laboratory shall communicate to the personnel their duties, responsibilities, and authorities. So at this point, perhaps ask yourself, hey, how is this done? Again, job descriptions is a source I see this utilized to fulfill this requirement, even though the standard does not require a job description. It can still be used to communicate, to personnel, their duties, responsibilities, and authority. Or even with a job description, and they're solidified that it's been communicated, it should be acknowledged by personnel, a signature, and can be supplemented through regular reviews or employee evaluations. All right, clause 625 have various elements under here. The laboratory shall have procedure and retain records for. So if you're an internal auditor, or if you're going to be assessed, your assessor would be looking for a procedure, which will be something that states how it is done, and a record, which showing that it, what was done. So under 625, the laboratory shall have procedure and retain records for, and it keeps popping up here in this clause, particularly determine the competence requirements. We already spoke, an example of where that can be captured, job description posting, evidence of determination of competencies. B, selection of personnel. Records can be maintained, posting, interview notes, perhaps competency cross-reference. Those competency requirements that's been established and perhaps cross-reference them against candidates during the selection process. Training of personnel, you shall have a procedure, a training procedure, and going to be looking for training records that may include things such as training attendance agendas, evidence that the competency was met, that the training was successful, ideally. D, the laboratory shall have procedure and retain records for supervision of personnel. So this would be perhaps a record of this would be on the actual training record of an individual. Personnel supervision acknowledging that the individual has successfully completed a portion of the documented training regime. Here, E, authorization of personnel. The way I like to express this is if you're testing or calibration items and you have various items on your scope of accreditation and individuals are brought in, perhaps they have past experience that was taken into account, perhaps they have to go through your full training program. There comes a point in time where a determination is made. Let's throw out the example for testing, or say Rockwell hardness testing, or for calibration, let's say the calibration of pipettes. It comes a time when an individual would be determined to be fully trained and determined that they can independently perform that testing or calibration activity on behalf of your organization. That's what we're talking about here under A, that authorization, when the person is officially authorized to perform those duties. That record would need to be captured. That can be captured, can be often I'll see an authorization matrix still being utilized, or it could be on individual training records. Seeing perhaps a supervisor or technical manager's signature as a sign-off that the individual has completed training and now can independently perform the said test or calibration activity on behalf of your organization. The laboratory shall have procedure and retain records for monitoring competence of personnel. So this is a new one when the standard was revised in 2017. So again, someone's fully trained. I mentioned here previously, you have to capture that authorization. Well, it has to be monitored now. So the laboratory will need to specify again how it's done and records maintained. So it's up to the lab to determine how to monitor. However, such vehicles can be used as perhaps checking personnel data and reports, or participating in interlab or even internal intra-lab testing. Other methods that can be incorporated can be such items as recertification, taking perhaps written test. And after training, perhaps after 60 days, to ensure that the training has been effective, supervision following up on that and creating a record. Okay, 626, still looking at specifically authorizing personnel here for A. You can see what A, B, and C states there. The laboratory shall authorize personnel to perform specific laboratory activities, including but not limited to the following. A, development, modification, verification, and validation of methods. B, analysis of results, including statements of conformity or opinions and interpretation. And then C, report, review, and authorization of results. So these are other authorizations beyond just performing the test or calibrations. I'd like to zoom in on C there. I see this often with smaller organizations and is handled differently. where one individual may wear two hats. When I say two hats, they're authorized to perform the calibration or testing, and they perform that. However, they're also signing off and issuing the report. So in that case, there the individual would actually have to have a record of both authorization, i.e. to perform the said calibration or test. And then also they have to also have the authorization to issue reports. So again, a record would need to be captured for these individuals that are authorized to perform A, B, and C. An example could be an expanded matrix to incorporate these authorizations. That could be as simple as utilizing your, it's a little small there, hopefully you can read that there, where you have individuals and then various, this is calibration activities there, X indicating whether they are, indicating that they are authorized to perform those said calibrations, and then perhaps can incorporate A, B, and C if they're also authorized to perform any of those other functions. That's not a requirement. That's just an example of how that record can be captured. All right, so I think we've gone through all the requirements. So this is the end of the presentation for personnel. So what I'm going to do now is pull out the question tab. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to type those in. Hello, could I please ask, is intra-lab study comparison also covered under 6.2? 6.2 is a whole entire section for personnel. That was an example. Intra-lab would be just an example of how you can demonstrate competency. It's not a requirement. Intra-lab is not to be confused with your proficiency testing program, unless you have been approved to do intra-lab studies. But perhaps an sorry, I'm getting backwards myself here. An intra-lab would be as a way to demonstrate competencies, perhaps have a senior technician test a sample or calibrate an artifact, and then internally pass it around between other techs, see if everybody's getting comparable results. It's not covered specifically in section 6.2. I just use that as an example of how to demonstrate competencies. Let's see here. Appreciate the compliment there. That's an individual expressed that they enjoyed the presentation, and Merry Christmas to you all as well. Does the authorized personnel require to have an eye exam, colored fastness test? Yeah, it's kind of vague, but it's kind of funny that's mentioned here. I can give you an example. Actually, you know, I'm the calibration program manager, but there was a time in my previous employment where I was responsible for seed testing, SEED. And these were folks who were looking at seeds under microscopes. I have all the respect in the world that they could determine these minute differences in seeds, can determine whether it was a pure seed, a noxious seed. I would, to answer your question, yeah, if need be, and I'm getting to that with this example here. One thing with this seed testing is you had to be able to distinguish colors. That was not defined in the job posting or competency requirements, and did not rear its ugly head until an individual got hired who we found out was colorblind. That impacted the analyzing of the seed. So I would say, depending on the particular test that's being performed there, and that example just came right to me when I saw your question here. You're talking about being able to distinguish colors, but yes, if any of these are physical attributes that needs to be presented before they can adequately perform a specific test or calibration, then by all means they should be determined as a competency requirement. I don't see why not. And actually, we actually included that in with our job description for those folks that were doing that particular seed testing, because hey, you needed to be able to distinguish colors. You had to have a trained eye in order to distinguish differences within seeds. All righty, so good questions there. Looks like that was the last one. Hey, I appreciate good questions there. I had a few of them. Hopefully the presentation was good. Again, you can go back and extract this from our website here shortly after this presentation. Before I go, I want to wish everyone a happy holiday season. I enjoy doing this all year. We haven't missed a month. Been doing a webinar every month. So again, wish everyone a happy holidays, and I look forward to picking up next year, which we already have scheduled, January 27th. And actually, we did the same thing last year. What we do is we'll go back and we have data from PGLA assessments as far as nonconformances and areas of nonconformances. And what next month we'll look at, we're going to put together a top 10 list, top 10 areas where PGLA assessors had the most nonconformities. We'll look at them and dissect them a little bit and perhaps discuss, perhaps why they were problem areas. So look forward to having everybody back next year. Look forward to doing it again. And again, hey, happy holidays, everyone, and Happy New Year as well. Good afternoon.